We're here with Dr. Dan Seigel, best-selling author, founder of the Mindsight Institute, and well known for presenting complicated brain science in a fun and accessible way. Welcome, Dan. Tell us what you've been up to.
Thanks, Jim. It's a pleasure to be here. At the Mindsight Institute, what we've been up to is working with a field called Interpersonal Neurobiology, which is basically a field where we take all the different disciplines of science, from math and physics all the way to sociology and anthropology, bring them together to ask, what is the mind and what is a healthy mind? And in doing that, we've looked at this process called Mindsight, which is how you have insight into yourself, empathy for other people, and then a process called integration, which is how you link differentiated parts. So let's say between me and you right now, Jim, it would be where we honor differences between us and then promote passionate, respectful communication as a linkage. So the linkage of differentiated parts is integration. And in many ways, what we explore in the field of interpersonal neurobiology is the notion that integration is the basis of well-being, of resilience, and even when integration is made visible, what comes out is compassion and kindness. So in the work we do at the Mindsight Institute, we're trying to look at processes like, let's say, mindful awareness and understand it from this large framework of science that says, for example, that being aware of the present moment, of letting go of judgments, and of trying to track moment to moment, not only sensations, but even moment to moment emotions and thoughts, can be described as a state of presence. And presence has a whole science behind it, as well as a whole set of applications that, for example, in mindful awareness practices, you can understand that they cultivate presence. Now, for us, presence is a state of mind that is a portal for integration to unfold. And it's associated with all sorts of positive physiological factors like improvement in your cardiovascular profile, your immune system, improvement in your telomerase levels to help repair and maintain the ends of your chromosomes, and even to optimize the epigenetic controls on top of your genes that allow you to prevent certain autoimmune diseases related to inflammation. So in many ways, presence is a state of mind that creates physiological well-being. But even in relationships, presence, let's say in my field of attachment research, we can study how presence of a parent leads to well-being of a child. So what we're up to in the Mindsight Institute is basically taking these fundamental ideas, supporting this series that I edited that I founded at Norton, which is the Norton Professional Series on Interpersonal Neurobiology. And there, I just turned in the 50th book in the series, and I've been overseeing the publication of other writers who write in that field. And what the book Mind tries to do is look at this really, really amazing finding, which is that almost all of the fields, if not all of the fields that deal in academia with the mind, let's say psychology and psychiatry, even anthropology, or even cognitive neuroscience, they don't have a definition of mind short of brain activity. And in the book Mind, what I try to do is explore how mind is something bigger than the brain. It's a process that is not the same as brain activity, even if it's dependent upon it. So this is what we're up to at the Mindsight Institute, how to reach out to school systems, K through 12 and higher education, clinical work in mental health and medicine, working with people who are supporting children's development, like parents and teachers, helping support the work of spiritual practices and even organizations such as various religions, and in the mindfulness world, supporting meditators and how they can understand the importance of neuroplasticity and how you use the mind to actually integrate the brain. One way of summarizing what mindfulness is about. So we're busy doing all these different things, trying to really cultivate more compassion and kindness in the world as we support the scientific and practical ways of understanding and promoting integration in our world.
Dan, that's so cool. And what strikes me about it is it's working at a vast conceptual framework and at the same time immediate benefit for patients, human beings suffering from different afflictions. And it seems like it'll serve as the underpinning for work not only for you in the future, but for a lot of other people. That's very cool. So looking towards 2016, what do you have emerging in your work?
For 2016 at the Mindsight Institute, what we're looking forward to is continuing this outreach to lots of different groups. But there are two particular areas that I'm especially fascinated with and driven to try to deeply understand and then bring out in a practical way to the world. And one of them is a practice that we've been using in the Mindsight Institute for a long time called the Wheel of Awareness. We've had a lot of people download it from our website, where you can go to the resources tab and click on the wheel. And when they do that, people have the experience when they integrate consciousness by differentiating a knowing in the hub from the known on the rim and systematically move the metaphoric spoke around of attention. What people have experienced is this sense of opening of not just awareness, but of identity. And this wheel practice has been fascinating to accumulate. Now I've given it in person to over 10,000 individuals, and I've been recording all of the findings that people report. And there's a universal practice across the world that people seem to experience in this wheel that allows them to tap into the second issue, which I'm really fascinated with, which is the idea that in modern culture, people have been told what I think is ultimately a myth, and at worst we could call it a lie, which is that the word self, S-E-L-F, is identified by your skin, by your body. That, Jim, you have a self, I have a self, and these are separate selves. This myth of an isolated self is what Einstein called an optical delusion. And the delusion is a belief that's not consistent with reality. And I think the wisdom traditions for thousands of years have known this, but science has repeatedly emphasized what child development experts also emphasize, so that parents and teachers do too, which is the self is separate. So one of my projects for 2016 and beyond is to take practices like the Wheel of Awareness and to take a deep look at interpersonal neurobiology views of reality and say, what is the self? And if the self does come from the mind, we come to learn, and I deal with this in this next book, Mind, in a deep way, we come to learn, in fact, that if the self is derived from the mind, mind is not limited to your skull, even though it may be dependent upon brain processes. I think it's not the same as them, nor is it limited by the skull. And it's not even limited by the skin. That I think the mind is a process and the self coming from it that emerges from energy and information flow. And that flow is not limited by skull or skin. And when we come to look at the practical implications of this, and the wheel practice, people experience it directly, but the concept is this, that we are a part of interacting nodes in a larger system. And I think modern culture has mistakenly identified the node of the system as the sole origin of self-experience. And by confusing the node with the self, people have become miserable. And they've come to feel that the only way to help this private self in the misery of isolation is to accumulate material things. And in a material acquisition and consumption, we're basically treating the planet like a trash can. So climate change issues actually relate to this idea of identity. And rather than getting rid of a me that lives in your body and saying, oh, I'm just a part of a system, I think the self is actually the nodes and the system that they are interconnecting within. And that when we embrace the we of the system and the me of the node, when you put them together, you get this integrated identity of self, which is M-W-E, we. And you can have a me that sleeps well, that exercises well, that takes care of what you eat and enjoys the body. That's great. That's a me. But you also have a self and a mind that are distributed, that you are a part of a much larger whole, not that you are separate, but that you have these differentiated facets of being a self. You have a self that's a me, a self that's a we. So the me is this notion of how we have an integrated identity. And that's the kind of project we're working on in 2016 and into the future.
Wow, that's a beautiful vision and quite a large agenda for the coming years. Lastly, what can Mindful do to help support this work, both your own work and the work in the mindfulness field in 2016? What would you recommend?
You know, the thing I think we have to realize is that we're all in this together. And with Mindful, the beautiful work you're doing, Jim, and the whole mindfulness field, I think is an incredible opportunity to awaken people's minds to get beneath the previously existing belief sets that the self is separate, that the way you reach happiness is by material acquisition, and through what I would consider is mind-sight practices of getting insight into oneself. Mindfulness, for example, is one practice, but also empathy for others, and then promoting integration, the three elements of mindsight. Mindfulness works beautifully with that. So what Mindful can do, I think, as a part of our teamwork, because this isn't just a project from the Mindsight Institute, it's, I think, for the whole world, is we need to find ways to support each other. So my question for you, Jim, is how can we support you? Because as we do this, literally, when we differentiate and link, we're going to get the incredible reality, which is when you have that kind of integration, the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. So you do your part, we'll do our part. We need to communicate with each other to get these ideas out there, to make sure they feel true and authentic to our own direct experience. But then as we go out in the world, what we're trying to do, and if there is a specific thing to ask for you, this is what it would be. What our role, I think, at the Mindsight Institute is to take all the fields of science, bring them together in this field that's now has this name, Interpersonal Neurobiology, reach out to scientific endeavors, to practical endeavors like education, parenting, clinical work in medicine and mental health, and together bring this out into the larger world like you're doing with Mindful, so that if we stay grounded in a scientific base, we can be consistent with science, perhaps not constrained by it, but consistent with it, so that we can actually bring compassion and kindness, to bring integration and health into the world together. So together, we can do this. And I'm looking forward to being on that journey with you, Jim, and everyone else in the mindfulness world.
Thank you so much, Dan.